Honkai Star Rail often makes references to other games, movies, and even manga. More often than not, these Easter eggs end up as just harmless references, appearing as cleverly worded achievements or maybe a literal object in game. It's just a way for the developers to show their love for the things they like and really has no bearing on the story or lore whatsoever. Or do they? What if I were to tell you that the Nameless are themselves an Easter egg? One that may have revealed the total number of members the Nameless will ultimately have, and something tied to a rather popular and well-known manga. I warn you though, once you see this, you cannot unsee it. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my completely dumb idea of why the Nameless will only have around 10 members. Before we get into that, if you want to see more nonsense Honkai Star Rail theories, do consider subscribing to the channel. Have you ever heard of One Piece? It's a rather well-known manga that has been around for about 27 years and has over 1,000 manga chapters and anime episodes. The story basically revolves around the main character, Monkey D. Luffy, and his pirate crew. Luffy and his crew are basically on a journey to find the greatest treasure in the world, the One Piece, and along the way fulfill each of their personal dreams. As Luffy travels the world of One Piece, he meets and recruits individuals to join his crew, the Straw Hat Pirates. Now, why am I talking about some random manga when in the intro I spoke about some hint to the number of members the Express will have? For those of you who are familiar with this manga, I think you already know where I'm going with this, but for those of you who are not, it's basically like this. While most pirate crews in the world of One Piece have tens to even hundreds of members, the Straw Hat crew really only has a handful. In fact, there is a prevailing idea that was even hinted by the manga's author Eiichiro Oda that the Straw Hats will have only about 10 members. I understand that you might still be confused. Even if the Straw Hat crew has 10 members, what has that got to do with the Nameless of Honkai Star Rail? Well, the thing is, the Straw Hats and the Nameless might have more in common than you might initially think. If you put each of them side by side and compare their roles, character themes, and even personalities, they will start to appear quite similar to one another. So much so that for every Nameless member, there is almost a version of them on the Straw Hat crew. I'm not saying it's a one-to-one copy, but some of the resemblance is uncanny. If you don't believe me, let's just talk through one character at a time, and after a while, I'm sure you'll start seeing it too. Let's start off with the main character. Monkey D. Luffy, the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, is both its strongest member and kind of its dumbest. Luffy is as simple as they come, but is considered a combat savant. He is able to defeat opponents far stronger than he is through sheer instinct and creativity, despite being a complete idiot in literally all other aspects of life. He is the quintessential simpleton with a golden heart and would jump into the fray without a moment's hesitation to save his comrades. Now, does that remind you of anyone? A well-meaning idiot who solves things by bonking them and has a penchant for jumping in front of people in an attempt to save them. Yeah, it's pretty much the Trailblazer. Depending on your dialogue choices, the Trailblazer can be a rather typical hero type or a somewhat straightforward simpleton. They have some weird attachment to trash cans, often resort to physical solutions in altercations, and often has no sense of self-preservation. I'm not saying they are completely brain dead, but compared to Dunhung and March, the Trailblazers sometimes appear as though they were dropped multiple times as a child. Despite this, you can't deny how strong they are. They have gone up against some of the most powerful individuals in the universe and oftentimes have even bested them. To add to that, much like Luffy, the Trailblazer has also come back from several near-death experiences, only to ultimately defeat their opponent. What makes it even weirder is how similar some of their confrontations are. Luffy lost to the Shichibukai crocodile twice and ended up being impaled by them only to return and defeat him, while the Trailblazer was also impaled by Cocolia and then coming back to defeat her as well. Then you have Luffy seemingly taking the full brunt of Kaido's breath attack while the Trailblazer took a hyper beam from the Doomsday Beast. But the similarities don't stop there. The Trailblazer, much like Luffy, has within them a secret power not yet revealed. This is a spoiler for One Piece by the way, but Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi is in truth the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, which doesn't just give him rubber powers but instead Looney Tunes level of reality warping. While the Trailblazer doesn't have a devil fruit, they do have a Stellaron embedded within them, an object of immense power that can also warp reality. Even the way they each got their power seems almost similar, with Luffy obtaining or rather stealing it from his mentor Shanks, and the Trailblazer getting it from their former mentor Kafka. So suffice to say, there's quite a few similarities between the Trailblazer and Luffy, but that's only one character, right? That doesn't mean anything. Well, let's talk about the quiet and stoic best friend next. Luffy has Zoro while the Trailblazer has Dan Heng. On the surface, you might not see the resemblance right away. But if I were to say a green-themed close friend of the main character who acts as the stoic guard of the ship, who also has abilities that are themed or named after dragons, who would you think of? Not only do they have similar roles and friendship positions with the main character, they both have a rather disconnected past with their homelands and share a habit of sleeping on the floor. Dan Heng has even technically died and came back to life, and that's clearly what happened to Zoro here despite him not wanting to talk about it. So while it's not a one-to-one copy, Dan Heng does share some traits with the vice captain of the Straw Hats, Roronoa Zoro. Now comes the chink in the armor of this theory. March, the bubbly, happy, and second close friend of the Trailblazer. Clearly, there isn't anyone similar to her. She doesn't behave like either Nami or Robin, and there aren't any other women on the crew. But what if we don't compare her to the female members of the Straw Hat crew? Now, I admit this is a bit of a gender bend, but March is clearly Usopp. Both of them are the fun-loving close friend of the main character, they both are ranged combatants, both of them often make stuff up about their past because one doesn't remember it while the other is a pathological liar, and at the end of the day, despite their apprehension for getting into fights, they will proudly stand up for their friends when they have to. While they might not be similar in appearance, at the very least, March and Usopp are similar in spirit to one another. Now earlier I mentioned Nami, and this is likely the one that needs the least explanation. A red-headed navigator whose job it is to set the direction of the journey and maintain all the maps and charts of their travels is clearly Himeko, right? Do I really need to elaborate on this? Nami and Himeko are pretty similar to one another as they both use technology-based weapons, are both navigators, and they even have similar assets. So yeah. While the navigator is an important role, every crew also needs a chef or a cook. Someone who can provide nourishing meals for the group after long journeys and tough battles. In the context of One Piece, this would be Sanji, the blonde, genetically modified, suit-wearing, flaming leg cook of the Straw Hats. As you try to recall the full roster of the Nameless, you might think there is no blonde cook on the Express. But the thing is, there kinda is. You see, when the Nameless first came together, Welt didn't join alone and brought along with him Void Archives. We know Void Archives has blonde hair, but also that during their time, Void is the one who taught the butler robot how to mix drinks and make food. It's not exactly the same thing, but he is technically the closest person they have to an onboard chef next to Pom Pom, of course. On top of that, their story arcs are also kinda similar. While he was there originally, Void Archives has since left for some unknown reason, which is perhaps similar to Sanji's Whole Cake Island arc. In that story, Sanji essentially left the Straw Hats, albeit temporarily, to deal with his past. There was an entire thing with him leaving, fighting Luffy, and even seemingly betraying his former crewmates, but he then eventually returns. It's really only a matter of time before we reunite with Void Archives, perhaps under even the same circumstances. So the closest approximation of Sanji is very clearly Void Archives. Speaking of Void, let's talk about Welt next. Now, what do we know about Welt? We know he is knowledgeable about technology, we know he is sort of the older brother or uncle figure of the team, and most importantly, we know he has a secret fondness for mechas. The only thing he is lacking are nipple lights and his speedo, but Welt is pretty much Frankie. Admittedly though, Welt is a bit tough for me to justify because we know that he was once a history teacher, so he could be a stand-in for Robin as well, given she is the archaeologist of the Straw Hats. However, I think there is another person more suitable, Black Swan. The Memo Keeper has experienced and often witnessed the many histories of other planets as she collects their memories. She's akin to a type of historian or archaeologist, and even though she isn't officially a Nameless and is only here temporarily, it's kind of the same thing with Robin in the early days. As you might know, Robin first joined the Straw Hats temporarily and only considered them as a means to an end. So perhaps Black Swan will also have a change of heart at some point and join the Nameless officially. So far, we have discussed the main character, the express guard, the chef, the navigator, the happy best friend, the uncle figure, and potentially the archaeologist. Every crew member also needs a mascot, and for that, the Nameless have Pom Pom, while the Straw Hats have Tony Chopper. Admittedly, this is a great disservice to Chopper, who is actually the doctor of the Straw Hat crew, but sadly, most in the One Piece world consider them as more of a pet or a mascot. So while Pom Pom is not a doctor and isn't nearly as combatively powerful as Chopper, I just thought it was funny that both crews also happen to have what is essentially a pet/mascot. Finally, we reach the newest member of the Nameless, Sunday, who, if you haven't already guessed, is the musician of the group, much like Brook is. In fact, Brook was recruited purely because he was a musician, and as Luffy puts it, every crew needs one. Of course, Sunday and Brook are nothing alike, but give it some time and I'm sure Sunday will eventually start playing the piano while singing Binks' Sake. So really, the only member that the Nameless doesn't have, but the Straw Hats do, is their helmsman, Jinbei. Maybe in the future, we might recruit someone to pilot or drive the Astral Express who comes from a water planet like the one we didn't get to go to, but other than that, practically everyone else is present here. Now, the idea behind this video was that given how similar each of these characters seemingly are, it's evidence or at least a hint that the Nameless will only have 10 members, much like the Straw Hats. In truth though, I just wanted to make a comparison between these characters because I found it hilarious that they had so many similarities. This could be something that was done on purpose given the devs are a bunch of weebs, but it could equally just be a complete coincidence. Nevertheless, all this is just meant to be a fun way to bridge the gap between a manga I enjoy and Star Rail, so I hope you don't take it too seriously. With that, I'll swiftly end the video here. Do you think the Nameless are similar to the Straw Hats or not at all? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found the video entertaining, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.